There we are. Notification. All right, great. Thank you everyone for joining today. This is second meeting of the year for the Connecticut Data Analysis and Technology Advisory Board. I'm grateful for everyone's attendance. We are going to try and cover the agenda in a little less than the time allocated, but if there's changes that folks want to make, we can always sort of adjust in real time. So I'll pull the agenda up in a second. Can we go through and just do the welcome and introductions for everyone? I know that we have at least one, possibly two, a couple of people that are new to the group. Again, it's the Data Analysis and Technology Advisory Board. It's through Section 2-79E of Connecticut General Statutes. My name is Scott Gall. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Office of Policy and Management, Chair of the Board, and we have I believe 4 of the voting members on hand. And if we can go through, have you all just introduce yourself, and then we have several of the representatives from the other additional members of the board here as well. I know one voting member, Michelle Reardon-Olds from Connecticut Data Collaborative, is not able to make the meeting today. So I know there's one person that's out. And the way I see it on my screen, we have Seth, Thad, and Bree. If you can all introduce yourselves.
Sure. In that order, I'll start. My name is Seth Klaskin. I am a former state manager, having previously directed the Business Services Division for the Secretary of the State of Connecticut for almost 9 years. Before becoming a vendor, I sell technology. So I've been on both sides.
Hi, I'm Thad Dimkowski. I'm the GIS analyst for the town of South Windsor. I've been working in the technology field, primarily geospatial technology, for 22 years, both private, public, and academic sectors.
I am Bree Berner. I work for the legislative branch, and I'm appointed by the House Minority Leader, and like GIS and other forms of data.
Just on his behalf, I think he's joining momentarily. Frank Gentile is the latest appointed member of the board, I believe appointed through Senator Kelly, and has been very active and interested in participating. So once he joins, hopefully we can make a second for him to introduce himself. But maybe we can go through folks from the other members of the board. I know across my screen I see Dave, and Deborah, and Colleen. Oh, and Charlotte, sorry.
All right, so sticking with the going in that order, David Labadia. I work for DAS in the BITS division. I am the Director of Digital Government and Operational Excellence. Nice to meet everybody. 25 years in technology, specifically aligned with data and analytics.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Deborah Schonder. I'm the state librarian. I replaced Ken Wigan in January 2021. In addition to us being a service and research agency, we also oversee state archives and the Office of the Public Record Administrator, which includes retention schedules and coordinating with the state on keeping our state records.
And last, it's me, Colleen Murphy, the Executive Director of the FOI Commission, and I'm ex officio non-voting member of the group. I've been here since the beginning of it, have worked in freedom of information for just about all of my career. So I deal with all things open government, not anxious what's been happening.
Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte Muller, and I am here on behalf of the State Comptroller's Office.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Newman. I'm here for the Attorney General, who is also non-voting ex officio member.
And I know there's one other name. Valentina, do you know if there's anyone else from one of the additional ex officio members, or if anyone wants to announce themselves? Sorry. All right. I believe. Okay, great. Thank you. I believe Frank is getting situated and hopefully will join momentarily. Let me do two things. I'm going to pull the agenda back up just so we can review that quickly. And then I think in the last meeting, I believe in the past we've used Robert's rules for the meetings, given that this is still a group that's kind of reconvening, and we have, I don't believe that we're passing any business. I don't know if folks are comfortable conducting a more informal meeting and suspending that if you wish to. I realize we're already pretty deep into doing that, but if folks are comfortable with that, please let me know and we'll keep this a more collegial.
I'll make a motion to suspend Robert's Rules of Orders for this meeting.
Thank you, Thad.
I'll
Anyone want a
second that.
All right,
Do we
great.
second an informal motion? Yeah.
I think we have to vote on it, so I'll call I don't know whether we have to vote on this or not. We'll find out, but we vote on the motion to suspend the Robert's rules for this meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unopposed? Abstentions? Great. All right. So I'm going to conduct a more hopefully informal, and again, as we get closer to end of the year and the finalization of the state data plan, which is part of what we want to cover in this meeting, can make sure that we are using the procedures that the board would like to move that business forward. I'm going to pull the agenda up just very quickly. And again, we're covering, I think, one quick update from the discussion at the last meeting, go through the timeline and planning and getting the board members to think about what you would like to see included in the next installment of the state data plan. Again, as a refresher, it covers a 2-year period, so we are closing out the current 2-year period, and at the end of the year, we'll submit a new state data plan. And then we had, I think, rich discussion on open data portal, interagency data sharing, geospatial data, the last meeting, and we'll go through some updates made to the tools based on the discussion at the last meeting. One sec. Oh, Valentina, I think Frank is here and trying to get into the meeting, so we can let him in to the virtual meeting. Sorry. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the agenda.
I don't see him. He's not in the waiting room.
Okay, let me pull I'm going to pull the slides up if you bear with me. I'll start going through that and then see if I can communicate that at the same time. We've opted to have these as virtual meetings. If folks want to have them in person, please let me know. All right. All right, I'm going to pull the slides up. Can you? Do you see the slides with, sorry. Does everyone see slides in presentation mode? So I can verbally.
We cannot see the slides yet.
Oh, okay. What did I do wrong? Share. Now do you see presentation mode? Do you see them in presentation mode the way you feel that you're supposed to? Not the
No, Scott, they're coming through on the presenter mode, so we're not
presenter mode. Curses. Bear with me. Better?
Perfect.
Perfect. Second time's a charm. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to go through some of this. So again, we're hoping to, I think, wrap most of this in an hour. A quick refresher, role, power, and duties for the data board. It's essentially, it is an advisory board advising all 3 branches of government, municipalities, and so on data policy. It invites us directly, OPM, on the online repository, which is the state's open data portal. And then the board itself has sort of a set of different powers and duties to sort of look more deeply at issues that you want to raise about use management of data, particularly through executive branch agencies. So this is kind of the statutory purpose for the board. and it's a good refresher and a reminder that there's a considerable amount that this board can do. It's not just a mechanism to approve the state data plan. So I think when folks have topics you want to dig into deeper, you've got the ability to do that. Next, we had, I know this is from a request from Michelle Rudenold at the last meeting. She had asked about some of the legislative changes, particularly related to children's mental health and behavioral health. And so whether there were implications for data collection for the state for that. So this is a slide, and we'll send these out afterwards. You can have in the minutes as well, that covers a couple of the legislative changes in this area, just so that we do have a summary of those. And again, if anyone wants to dig deeper into any of this, let me know. Just to cover it quickly, there's two pieces of legislation last year that had some implications for data collection management use by the state. The first has these sort of three bullets here. There's two different types of new data collection that are coming into play. And then probably the most consequential change is there's a new behavioral and mental health policy and oversight committee that I believe has yet to be convened, but that committee has the substantial access to data, and I'll quote here, collected by the state on matters related to children's behavioral health from the relevant state agencies or directly from contracted administrative service organizations. So that committee appears to be the primary way in which we'll be able to get a richer understanding of children's behavioral health. But as I understand it, it's not yet being convened. I think it's close to that point. So, and then there was an additional data collection through a separate piece of legislation, although I think this is sort of less consequential for the state. So that's, again, I just want to give the update on the request to kind of look at that in more depth. We'll provide this so you can look at it in a little more detail if you want, but I think that's a brief summary of some of the legislative changes from the last session for children's mental health. Any questions on this? I don't know if I can see hands raising. Oh, okay. All right, so I'm going to go through a quick summary of the state data plan, what it is intended to do, the timeline for the updates, and then what's in the current 2021-2022 state data plan. All, I think, with the mind that this board plays a central role in developing a new state data plan and getting that out to the public. And so there's work that we can collectively do now before the end of the calendar year, and then ideally really over the next 2 years in the work to sort of implement and make that plan real. But for right now, we've got the better part of 3 months plus a little bit to develop and finalize a plan. And I just want to go through what the plan covers, the timeline. There's a couple of different milestones that we have to hit, and what's in the current state data plan, so you have a sense of where we're starting from. And again, please, if there's, I can see, I think most people in the hands raising, but if there's something you want to pause on, just let me know. So again, as a refresher, in case you do not have this committed to memory, this is a brief summary of what's in the state data plan pursuant to section 4-67P of the general statutes. It covers these 5 topics here. The standards for data analysis and data management for executive branch agencies. It ideally should set specific achievable goals for the 2-year time frame for the plan. It should have ways in which we make recommendations to enhance the standardization and integration of data across executive branch agencies. Particularly if there are legal concerns or other obstacles to sharing of data, not just legal, but also related to security and privacy, that we provide a way in which we are identifying, reviewing, and ideally addressing those obstacles in a timely fashion. And then specifically calling out, again, goals for the online repository, which is the state's open data portal. So those are the 5 things that the state data plan is required to cover. Again, it covers a 2-year time frame. I'll go through the timeline for reviewing and approving this in a second. And then My role is working with all of the executive branch agencies. Every agency designates an agency data officer that is sort of tasked with implementing a lot of these things as it pertains to their individual agency. And we can make recommendations for the legislative or judicial branch, although I am not sure the extent to which we can enforce any of those things, but we can always make recommendations in the plan. It's pretty squarely focused on the executive branch and looking at those agencies. And as you can see from sort of 3 and 4, there's a lot focused on standardization, integration, sharing of data between agencies, and then out with the public through the online repository. All right, timeline here. So this is, I put these as draft, although some of these are more set in stone than others. This is a rough timeline for updating the state data plan. So kind of working backwards by December 31st, end of the calendar year. Plan needs to be finalized, and then we'll begin the implementation of it in 2023, 2024. So we're working towards the end of the calendar year to have a finalized plan. There's a milestone in the middle here where in statute, I need to submit, Chief Data Officer submits to the data board a preliminary draft of the plan by November 1st. So this board will receive a draft of the next data plan by November 1st. And then the other requirement of statute is that within 30 days, the board holds a hearing, public hearing on the draft plan and recommends revisions. So that could either be your recommendations as members of the board, or if we are successful in holding, receiving public comment or getting feedback through different ways that we're incorporating that into the plan then. So right now, the work begins to kind of draft the plan, identify the priorities, what should it cover. I will then do what I can to sort of capture that, pull that into a preliminary draft, send that back to this board by November 1st. We've got 30 days to hold the public hearing, gather more input from board members or members of the public, and then essentially, I think the month of December would be to finalize the plan based on those recommendations and get that submitted by the end of the calendar year. So that's the approximate time frame here. The plan, in general, I think the state data plan is and should be, kind of a working document. So it's not as if the process of receiving, public input or ideas ends on December 31st. But we want to make sure that we get ideas in earlier rather than later, so that we can reflect them in the next installment of the plan. I can talk in a second about the ways in which we've done outreach in the past, but what I'd like to hear from board members particularly are either suggestions that you have for making sure that we conduct broad stakeholder outreach at any time before the finalization of the plan. If there's particular groups, constituencies, issue areas that you want to make sure are in focus, the extent to which you can assist with outreach to those groups is always very helpful. I think that's where the board plays a really important role of giving the state a window into the outside world that we often lack. And trying to think through, what do we need to make sure kind of happens so that by the time this plan is finalized, it really reflects the priorities that this board wants to make sure are there. I'm going to pause, though, for a moment and see if we can have Frank, who I now see on the screen, say hi, introduce himself. And Frank, if you want to spend a minute just giving a little more of your background as the newest appointed member of the board, we're grateful for your service, and apologies for sending you to the wrong location today and chewing up probably a substantial portion of your afternoon. So
that's okay. Thank you for including me. So my name's Frank Gentile. I'm the IT director at the City of Danbury, where I've been approximately 10 years. And in that role, I manage a team of mostly consultants from various companies. Essentially my focus is both application support, application integration, and also infrastructure. So it's everything from the infrastructure of the IT environment to our enterprise applications. And previous to that, I was at New Haven Public Schools as their IT director for approximately 8 years as a city employee, and then a year before that as a contractor for GEITS, and then approximately 12 years previous various private sector roles and different companies that had to do with IT. So that's my background. I'm classically trained in IT. I have an undergrad in computer science and a master's in technology management, both from universities within Connecticut. My undergrad many years ago was from Sacred Heart, and my grad degrees from Central Connecticut State. Beyond that, one of my big, I guess not really a concern, but hope is to understand how data can be better used by the municipalities throughout Connecticut for things like application for grants and funding. In addition to that, I'd like to understand what our identified data consumers are for the open data portal, and then figure out how to market better to them.
All right, thank you. And thank you. Welcome to Data Board. And again, I apologize for getting you sent to the wrong location, but I'm glad you're here. And I will look forward to meeting you in person when this meeting is over. So, all right, I'm going to reshare the screen. We'll go back to the timeline. Tell me, did I do this correctly? We're back. You see the timeline. Great. So again, at this point in the process, we're in the sort of September moving into October window. We want to make sure that we're conducting, beginning any stakeholder outreach, identifying again priorities that you as board members have, or priorities from the broader world outside. There's some things that need to start moving forward also for the executive branch agencies, just for the compliance pieces that they have as part of the same effort. So we have to inventory data across agencies, develop access plans, do some surveying on the legal agreements. So that's all work that we can do sort of with the executive branch agencies, but the stakeholder outreach is the part that I really wanted to pause on. I want to see if there's first any questions or feedback to the extent you have it on the timeline here. If there's suggestions for stakeholder outreach, I can talk about sort of what we've done in the past, but that does not need to be the way we do things in the future. Are there groups or constituencies or issue areas that folks want to make sure that we're reaching before the final plan itself is finalized? I think from Frank, I hear the municipalities want to make sure that the state's data is something towns can use. That's an important group constituency that we often, there's Thad. I'm sorry, I didn't see the hands raised. Thad.
Hi, Scott. I wanted to bring up the idea of perhaps at least approaching the Connecticut Criminal Justice Information Systems, or CJIS. I know that they operate with a lot of data. They do a lot of data sharing at the municipal, and I'm sure at the state level as well. So CJIS is definitely an organization we may at least want to approach to get some feedback or to get some input or concerns that they may want to have included in the state data plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see Dave.
Yep. At first, I was going to throw Jeff Brown, our statewide Chief Information Security Officer, just as a security oversight to the plan. I think would be beneficial. In the same vein as the last comment, OHS has oversight over their health exchange information as well, so they may have some learnings that would be advantageous for us to hear.
Yeah, that makes sense. I will say too, just for folks that are not immersed in the development of many different state plans, we have at least two related kind of overlap plans that operate on different time frames. There's a state IT strategic plan, and then there's a health IT plan. And so Dave, through BITS, which is where Dave sits, the state IT strategic plan goes through there, and then there's through the Office of Health Strategy, they develop a health IT plan that's a 5-year plan. I think the state IT plan is a 1-year planning effort, but a goal I think I would have is that these are, to the extent possible, in alignment with one another. Which I don't think they're out of line with one another, but just for folks that don't have to contend with these, those are, I think, two related planning efforts. There might be more that are out there. I don't know if there's anything else that members of the board want to bring up that we should be paying attention to, or groups that we should reach out to. In the past, we've reached out, gone through executive branch agencies. We've gone through meeting with several different sort of subject matter area efforts where there's collaborative efforts across the state. And in particular, we've gone through the state's 2Gen advisory board that looks at two generational solutions. I think there's some other groups like that where we've had outreach in the past. To make sure that the way in which the state is collecting, managing, using data is consistent with the priorities for those groups. If there's other things like that that anyone wants to recommend, then we'll start scheduling that and trying to work on that outreach in the next couple of months so that it can go into, if not the first draft, at least the final version of the plan.
Scott, we haven't had all that much information in terms of and we may get some of that today in terms of how agencies are moving and progressing with their data, with their response to the data plan and actual data sharing and organizing libraries for public consumption and all of that. But I do think there is value in specifically reaching out to all of the executive agencies with the draft. If for nothing else, then give them heads up and give them an opportunity to be heard if they feel that there are any really big roadblocks to them providing data. If not, I would like to hope and think that we'll be able to move on with more progress and cooperation and more data from a lot of the agencies. So I do see value there. And then a quick request, and I mean, the timing looks good to me. Thank you. A quick request, and I'm sure you're already on top of this, but when we get the first draft and also the second draft, if we can get redlined versions so we know what is the proposed change or what the proposed changes are to consider, and we can be directed like mostly to those, that could help expedite our review. Thank you.
That definitely makes sense. So yeah, that's doable. And I think we'll see how many more comments there are in this section, but in the remaining part of the agenda, Pauline's going to go through some of the things that I think address a little bit what you're looking for, Seth, or not necessarily you're looking for it. Many people are looking for it. You're just the one bringing it up here. So, all right. Anything else on the outreach for this? Again, we'll start in the next month, reaching out to different groups, trying to draft this. If you have suggestions or thoughts that you want to share after this, please don't hesitate to do so, and I will we'll send a draft to this board by November 1st. I think at the end we can determine if you want to have an October meeting or if you want to have a November meeting on the heels of receiving the draft. We can decide that at the end of this. Anything else that folks want to bring up for the timeline and particularly focusing on the stakeholder outreach?
That's got his hand up. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, it's got another group that you might want to include is the GMIS, the Government Management Information Systems folks. They also, I mean, from a municipal level, they have a very active group, and they have a set of input that I think would be valuable as well.
Is that the professional association, or?
Yeah, well, it's primarily municipal IT directors and CIOs from across the state.
Thanks. All right. Anyone else? I don't see hands raised. If there's, let me know. I'm going to quickly, just in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly cover what's in the current state data plan. Just so you have as a refresher. Again, I assume people have not necessarily committed all of this to memory, but I'm going to cover it briefly, and then that's our jumping off point for, I think, like Seth is saying, kind of redlining for the next version. So the way the state data plans have, this will be the third. There was 1 2-year plan. I came in and helped with the development of the second 2-year plan, and then the next one will be the third 2-year plan. So each plan has included a set of focal points and kind of organized around that. So we have goals, metrics, implementation steps that are organized around these focal points. We don't need to do it that way, but that's the way it's been done previously. The last plan focused on, or current plan rather, focused on COVID-19, equity in the way in which data is collected, used, managed, and then being able to enable the state to use data effectively for decision making. So those are 3 focal points. With those, we have a set of goals and things that we can measure for each of those goals. The goals are slightly different than the focal points because we're trying to implement the goals through something that's a little more concrete. So the COVID-19 response, I think one thing we learned was the value that getting information out quickly to the general public has. And so we relied a lot on the open data portal. And then our goal for the 2021-22 plan was to make changes and improvements to the open data portal to make it a little easier. And we would measure that through, for example, site traffic, frequency and consistency of updates and metadata. And in a moment, Pauline will go through a little more about how we've been doing that. I see comments. Oh, that's from that. So there we are. These are the 3, again, the sets of goals and metrics that we have. And then each of those is broken out into much more detailed implementation steps. What can we actually do? I will note the plan is written within available resources. So these are things that we have the resources to do at the time the plan is written. If that changes, then we can do more or less kind of depending on that. But the way I would write the plan is based on the available resources so that it is something that we can actually do, not sort of a pie in the sky effort. I'll send these out. So let me transition in a minute to kind of what Pauline's going to cover. But Seth, to your question, we track, there's a few things that I think of as essentially compliance steps that agencies need to do as part of this broader section of the statutes 467P. They need to designate a point person for their agency. This covers the executive branch agencies, inventory the data their agency collects, update that on an annual basis, develop an open data access plan, and document the process through which they respond to requests for data from the public. So we have a little tracker here, and I can see, actually, I should have double check this, but I think there's a couple things that are out of date, but you get a rough read on the kind of compliance across state agencies. On this, we have a few holes, but it's pretty good, and it's gotten a little better in recent years. We had holes in a couple of agencies where we didn't have a complete inventory or the open data access plan wasn't complete, but that's gotten a little bit better. We have voluntary compliance from some agencies. So for the way the original legislation was written, it doesn't cover all the executive branch agencies, doesn't cover quasi-publics, doesn't cover constitutional offices. And so places like that can voluntarily comply, and we keep track of that here. So I will kind of make sure this is completely up to date for the next meeting, but this is how we've been looking at whether they're going through the elements that are required in this section of the statute about designating staff, inventorying their data, developing a plan for access to that data, and responding to requests for the public. And again, well, you'll have the slides afterwards, but if there's things you want to dig deeper into, like, why is this happening, or why is this not happening, or this doesn't feel like it's getting to the goals that you have, then we can use the ability of the board to dig a little deeper. One item that agencies have for kind of compliance is by the end of the year to every year, catalog high value data, inventory that, and then we publish the list of that data to the open data portal and then back to the agencies themselves. But this is a way that we collect everything that the state collects, basically. So if an agency collects or possesses data, be it from residents or businesses or property owners, we inventory that and we keep that inventory up to date every year. It does not change a lot year to year, but there's new data collections. I think, like we looked at for children's mental health, there will be new data collections now. So we want to make sure those are reflected in this inventory and kept up to date every year. So 2 things I did want to flag. We will launch this data collection soon. Back to the executive branch agencies. I think this is where I want to look if there's things that we need to add to it. I know in the past year, particularly to keep with some of the goals in the state data plan, we've looked at ways in which we might have more consistent demographic data, just understanding where agencies are collecting demographic data as part of one of these data sets is an important building block for that. Where do we have demographic data, much less whether it's consistent. And then I think to sort of what Dave was bringing up, the security level or classification for each of these data sets. We don't have an integrated process of inventorying that, but that's a something we're going to look for some alignment. I'd welcome if there's changes that anyone on the board wants to see for this inventorying process. It's really the building block for the data governance efforts for the state is to try and make sure we know what the assets are before we can begin the process of looking at sort of more governance around how those assets are used or managed. First, we just have to know what they are. So this inventory is an important building block for that process. Is there anything that are there any things that folks want to see change in this? You can sort of think about this afterwards, but I did want to flag this as something that we'll kick off the data collection. So if there's things you want to make sure are included in it, let us know before too long. I think we'll do this probably in October. Okay. Anything for data inventory? Then I am going to transition to, we're going to talk through the open data portal, and I will yield the floor to Pauline, and then she'll walk through some of the changes we've put in place since the last meeting in August, I believe.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. I'm Pauline Zaldonis. I'm the Open Data Coordinator. I work with Scott in the Data and Policy Analytics team at OPM. And we have just one quick slide on the Open Data Portal to touch on some of the topics that we talked about in the last data board meeting. And then I'm hoping we can do a quick screen share to show a new tool on the portal that also relates to what we were talking about in the last meeting. So just wanted to highlight some of the things that we're working on the Open Data Portal. One thing that I heard in the last meeting was, and I heard it again today, that there's an interest in who are the users of the Open Data Portal, who's using the data, how are they using it. So one thing I wanted to share is that we're working on developing a survey that we can share with our users to get a better understanding of who's using the portal, how are they using it, what challenges do they have, what improvements would they like to see, all of that sort of thing. So we hope to launch that in the next couple of weeks. There's also a survey of another group of users who are the data publishers at agencies that's already underway. We sent that out earlier this week. So that is to better understand the experience of agency staff who are publishing data on the Open Data Portal and to understand their needs and how we can better meet their needs. So that's the first bullet point. A couple other things I think we might have touched on in the last meeting, but just to sort of review, we're working on other guidance documents related to the Open Data Portal. This includes a process on data publication, one on data automation, automating updates to the portal, how to aggregate data, ensuring that we're protecting privacy of individuals, a guide on data visualization. We have a draft of that, disaggregation by race, ethnicity, and language. So there's a couple different resources that we're in the process of updating or putting out for the first time. We're also looking for opportunities to provide staff training for folks who work on the Open Data Portal. We're collaborating with Tyler Technologies, formerly known as Secreta, on that. And there's also updates on the GIS Open Data Clearinghouse, which will be a separate tool for GIS data. It will be managed by our GIS office at OPM. And I think the plan is to launch that on GIS Day, which I think is in November. So that was my slide. And then I did want to share one other thing, which was sort of to respond to some of the questions that we've gotten about sort of the agency use of the Open Data Portal, as well as traffic on the portal. We developed a new page on the portal that highlights some of the site analytics. Oh, I can share my screen. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do that. So let me pull up my browser. Let's see. Can you see my browser? I'm seeing a thumbs up. Okay, yes. Great. Hold on. I'm just going to increase the size of my window, and I'll just go through this quickly because I know we're trying to keep the meeting within the hour. But we can share the link for this with everybody. It is a public page on the Open Data Portal. This is an example of one of the data stories that we have on the portal, which again are just like simple pages. They function kind of like dashboards. So these, there's a couple different tabs that you can see at the top that cover the different topics here. This is the overview page. It gets into like very high level things like how many data sets do we have, how many maps, etc. It covers the most popular assets over the last 30 days, and you can kind of filter these. The bars are very tiny. If my screen were wider, it would not look so silly. Or maybe here, I'll pull it over. There we go. You can filter by time period to see the most popular data sets. So I'll just sort of breeze through this quickly because I don't want to take up too much time. But to address the question of how agencies are participating in the Open Data Initiative, there's this data by agency tab that will start answering that question. We have a simple bar chart that shows the number of public data sets by agency on the portal. So you can see DPH has the most with 87, followed by DSS with 79, OPM, and so on. So yes, so this sort of just gives a high level view. And then if you scroll further down the page, there's kind of a plain table, but it has a lot of good information about the agency data on the portal, number of data sets, number of data stories, the other types of assets. And then these are probably hard to see, but this is the number of data sets that are up to date according to the metadata on the portal. And then also these last four columns sort of get at the metadata completeness and the data updates, whether the data has been updated on time. So just continue on to the next tab. This tab highlights traffic to the portal. So it just shows it's loading, but it is a line graph of, so these are all, this is showing the different types of traffic over time since February 2020. It looks like traffic is going down because we're still in mid-September, but you can look at August. I don't know if you can see the tooltip that pops up, but it shows you that, you know, the number of API reads, downloads, grid views, and story views. And then this allows you to filter by agency, by particular asset. So this is really targeted towards data publishers so they can keep track of their data on the portal. And the last thing I will highlight is the data freshness page here. Next, you know, I think we've talked about previously about how we're working on cleaning up a lot of the old assets on the portal that are no longer being maintained, making sure things are updated. And I think the next step in that will be, well, so this page actually kind of gets at that because it shows, you know, how many data sets are up to date. But unfortunately, this kind of relies on the metadata because we need to know, you know, if the data set is updated daily, weekly, monthly, in order to calculate whether or not it's up to date. So you can see the biggest chunk is that most data sets still don't have that piece of metadata on update frequency. So working on metadata updates is next on our to-do list so that we will have a better sense of the freshness of the data, and also just because complete metadata will help users understand our assets on the portal. So we can share this link for sure. I will stop talking now if anyone has any questions about this, but I just wanted to let you know that you know, we heard your questions about some of the analytics. You're just wondering how agencies are interacting with the portal. So know that this is now publicly available for you to refer to. Any questions?
Just thank you, Pauline. That's very helpful. That's good information to have. I would imagine when we update the metadata, that orange slice will grow a bit in that pie chart. Yeah, but you
that's
know,
the goal.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, that's all I had for the Open Data Portal. So unless there's other questions, I'm going to pass it back to Scott.
All right. Thank you, Pauline. I'll emphasize two things on that. One, it is this page is new and a work in progress, but hopefully it's directly based on the feedback from this board that this is something you want to see. And so we're trying to make sure that we're adding changes in. If there's things that you, once you get the link for it, if you explore it and think like, oh, I wish we had this, or why isn't this there, then like it's relatively easy to make modifications to it, and feedback would be helpful. It's also something that the agencies themselves have asked for because they're posting data. They want to know what's happening with it, who's using it, is someone using it, and so it's a good way for them to track their own assets. And we've made it so that you can see it, but the agencies themselves will use it as well, I anticipate.
Can I also ask, it's
Yep.
my understanding that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 agencies. And so I know that there's a focus and emphasis more on the agencies like the P20 win agencies and the ones that are statutorily mandated to share. But it'll be interesting to see over time whether all the other agencies are also keeping up with their requirements to have an agency data officer, and to start recognizing the need to identify libraries and content that need to be shared. So just to keep in mind for the future. I know we need to have like early childhood information and health information, and all that stuff is primary consideration. But the goal is also hopefully to stimulate the agencies that are more on the back burner to recognize an affirmative need to step up and start sharing data as well.
Well, you have, Seth, you have opened a very tiny Pandora's box, but without belaboring too much in this, that legislation that was originally passed that created chief data officer, a lot of the sort of data governance functions, the legislative basis for open data portal is in 4-67P. And when that was written, it references a list of executive branch agencies that is much shorter than that. So I've heard different numbers over time. 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 is maybe at the higher end, but the list that is referenced there is, I forget the exact numbers, about 25 agencies. And so most of the efforts that were kicked off, several years ago, focused on those 25 agencies. So we have had outreach to other agencies. We've tried to broaden the net, but there's no real statutory basis for it. It's voluntary. We did try and move legislation to get a correct list of executive branch agencies in there. It's the wrong reference in the statute. So that it does require legislative change to do that. That would make life a little bit easier, but there's a little loophole that it's just an old list of agencies that's stuck there until we can change that.
Yeah, I apologize that I do have to run now, but maybe that's one thing we can consider as a recommendation to the legislature, is moving forward boldly on that now that we're coming out of the pandemic, and we recognize how remote work and it really requires a lot more data to be shared. And so that's just an ideal vision for me, but an idealistic vision for me, basically, but we can discuss that further as we move forward, and maybe it won't be a Pandora's box and won't be as controversial, especially considering one of the primary focuses of our state data plan is the recognition that the public owns the data, so we proceed from that principle. But anyway, thank you very much. I apologize, I have to drop now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Seth. Let me see if there's anything from either, because I know a couple of people have to leave, anything from either the timeline for state data plan updates, suggestions for stakeholder outreach, anything from Pauline's presentation the folks want to cover, and then I can go through some of the additional material, but I know we have a few people kind of leaving, and I don't want to have a meeting with half attendance. Anything that from the first part of this, if folks want to attend to, that we can take into account once we go back to our desks, basically, for this. Anything for stakeholder outreach, for the work that Pauline was sharing. There's a couple more things we were hoping to cover briefly today, but let's see if there's anything from what we've covered so far. Folks want to have an October meeting, or do you want a meeting? Oh, there's Frank. Sorry. Go ahead, Frank.
When we talk about or think about stakeholder outreach and trying to market this, and I think I don't know if this was discussed in the past at length, but what was done in the past? I mean, was this something that was sort of like a 411 outreach to folks through different agencies, or was this something that like a flyer that would be in like a motor vehicle bill or something? I mean, what kind of outreach was done in the past, or was it just targeted to specific agencies that would share data?
I can speak to 2 years ago. And I think we covered this real briefly, but again, this is maybe a good way to prime people to think about what you want to see in the future. I can speak to 2 years ago, and then prior to that, I'm not sure 100% the outreach for it. It's been, I don't think it's as broad as something in your DMV bill. It's not reaching every resident of Connecticut or every license holder. Yes, in that case, it's focused a lot on executive branch agencies because that's the scope of it. So we do outreach to the agencies through a variety of different forums, directly to agency data officers. We've done outreach to other sort of leadership at the agencies. We go through their state IT managers meetings. There's sort of different ways in which agency staff convene, and we've tried to reach out through that, which is easy to do. But the real, I think, the advantage for the board is getting us to talk to people who are not in state government, because at least the voting members of the board, you are generally like not in state government, and that's the thing that's tough for us to do, is reach outside of the walls of state government. It's pretty easy for me to get in touch with anyone from a state agency, but it's much harder to reach town managers or something like that. So I think that's where, if there's groups you think, oh, this is what we should be reaching, please say so now or later. And that's I think what a great function for the board.
Agreed. And I think one easy way to do that would probably be through the council of mayors. I don't know if you've thought about that before, but that would be probably a great way to kind of reach outside, because at that group you're going to have a bunch of town officials, and first selectmen and mayors go to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've done like email outreach through different listservs, and we've gotten in some cases, pretty rich feedback from municipalities. We had a very long note from one town a couple of years ago that I still remember. Yeah, I think it's that's a good opportunity to consider. Other suggestions?
Scott, if you're going for a municipality, you definitely want to go through like the CCM or the cost. And definitely hit them from that aspect. I think, Frank, I think that your idea is fine to hit the mayors up. I think that often they get overflowed with so much information that kind of getting that to trickle down to folks who are actually going to have, background input and information that's valuable to something like the state data plan, I think would be better going off to, let's say, a CCM or a cost or something like that. Where it can get to the folks that are really going to be able to make a difference and provide some valuable input.
Any other suggestions on groups to reach out to? Again, sort of the practical ideas like this, reach out to this group or this individual. Again, you can send them offline, and we'll try and pursue those that we can, but it's good to hear if there's ideas for that folks want to share now. We'll try everything. I mean, I'm very happy to, we should have outreach about this. The plan will get better through broad stakeholder outreach. Anything else? All right. Let me, in the interest of time, I want to see if at least the voting members of the board feel that we need to have a meeting in October, or if you want to have one in November after I send the draft plan. If we had an October meeting, I think it would be to dig further into sort of an initial draft of the plan before that draft gets submitted, or if you want to meet after the draft is submitted. I'm sort of open to suggestions either way.
Scott, I'll lend my support for an October meeting before the draft goes out and gets submitted. Just that some of us who are newer to the group have a chance to review it and perhaps offer any input, edits, or modifications. So I'd like to propose for an October meeting. I think that would be a really good idea.
And Scott, I would agree with that and support that.
I'll just defer to the others.
Any naysayers? Yeah, which is fine. So we'll. Okay, I think we'll and Valentina and I and our staff at OPM can work to try and schedule a meeting in October, and then we'll have something I think in November after the draft is finalized. That's when we have to do the public hearing in that 30-day window. All right. Any other? There was more I think we were hoping to cover, but I know we're losing a couple folks at the hour. Anything that anyone else wanted to bring up for the agenda? The two topics that I'll just verbally kind of convey them. One is at the last meeting, we talked about interagency data sharing and a focus on consent management. I think David brought up again that this is a priority in different areas. So we have through our state longitudinal data system, we had a board meeting a couple of weeks ago and are going to develop a working group to look at questions of consent management in state data sharing, both when consent is required, when it's not required, so that folks have a clear sense of that, and then looking at the tools that could be used for consent management. So that's a topic that I think this group discussed briefly at the last meeting, that hopefully we'll have a working group from that effort, which covers 11 different agencies, to look a little more at that in a little more depth. And I think that's an area that's pretty rich for the next state data plan, because it's consent management comes up in a lot of different contexts, both when consent is required, when it should be gathered kind of affirmatively, even if it's not required, and how that consent is sort of managed and tracked over time. That's a challenging issue for the state. And then the last thing we covered, I think, a lot of the new efforts from GIS office last time. Alfredo Herrera, our GIO, is out this week, but the one thing, and I think Pauline mentioned this, that we're hoping to do is launch the state GIS clearinghouse, ideally on GIS Day, which hopefully is in the middle of November. And I'm not sure, it will not be necessarily fully kitted out with all the features at that time, but we'll have something that we can launch by GIS Day. So we've got a state GIS clearinghouse that it gives people a path where they can access GIS data a little more easily than in the current state. So that should be hopefully something we can accomplish before the plan is finalized and drafted. So. Anything else from board members, other topics you want to cover? That covers everything that I think we had explicitly on the agenda. Hearing nothing. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time, your service here. We will distribute, I think they'll post the slides and meeting minutes relatively quickly. If you wanted links to anything that we shared in the short term, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll look at calendaring a meeting for October.
Scott, real quick, you're going to be sending out a copy of that the draft plan so that we can all look at it before that October meeting.
Technically, I only have to send it to you by November 1st, so I'm not guaranteeing that you will get anything for the October meeting. So it is certainly my hope, but I'm not going to commit to anything that is beyond what I have to do. So.
Understood and appreciated. Thank you.
So, thanks. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everyone, again. Appreciate your time. Sorry, Frank, for dragging you in from afar. So, all right. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.